Hi, my name is Billy, I read books, and sometimes I read surprising books, and that's what this video is about. I'm going to talk to you about 5 books that I've read that surprised me. So the first book I'm going to talk to you about is Snakewood by Adrian Selby. And if you've seen this on Goodreads, you will have seen that the average rating for this book is not very good at all. Normally when you see a book with that average rating, you normally avoid it. And that's what I was thinking when I'd seen it. I'd heard some people talk about it on BookTube and they praised it quite highly. And then when I look at it on BookTube, I see the average score and think, there's going to be something wrong with this. But I do like being surprised. And this book did surprise me because I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars and I've gone and read other books by Adrian Selby since. So this book is chronicling Caelan's 20. Caelan was the leader of a mercenary group and his 20 men. And this story is detailing what happened to Caelan, but it's done in diary format. But it's not done in a diary format from, say, one character writing down their memoirs or something like that. It's lots of different people, lots of different accounts from different people that they've either written themselves or from interviews that the author of this journal has done themselves. So there's lots of different dialects and accents and phrases. So if you've read a Joe Abercrombie book in his First Law series, and you can appreciate how some of those characters have different phrases. You can be reading a chapter and know which character you're following along with because what they say. But with Snakewood, it might just be a couple of pages from a person who had an interaction with Caelan, and it's written in their voice, in their style, so it switches quite a lot. And when you factor into that as well, that in this world, there's lots of unusual names for places, positions, organisations, and it's not really explained to you, you just have to go with it. So when you factor those in, you've got the diary format, which can be off-putting for some. You can have the lots of different regional dialects and words and phrases, so it's not consistent all the way through. You factor in the fact that it's a big world with lots of unusual names, and you factor in that it's a grimdark fantasy story as well. If you went into this story not knowing what to expect, it could be quite off-putting. If you wanted a traditional fantasy story, this isn't it. If you wanted a story told in a traditional way, this isn't it. But it surprised me in that regard. It was a pleasant surprise because once I got into it, I was hooked. Absolutely hooked. So yeah, Snakewood, don't believe the Goodreads rating. Know what you're getting into and you will be pleasantly surprised. Science fiction wise, book 2 of The Expanse, Caliban's War surprised me, and it surprised me again in a good way because I'd been a bit lukewarm on book 1, Leviathan War. If you've watched many people on BookTube, even fantasy readers, but definitely science fiction readers, they talk quite highly, very highly in fact, of The Expanse. There was the TV adaptation that was done, which I've got to say I wasn't a big fan of. I only watched 1 episode, and everyone likes it. So why wouldn't I like it? So when I read Leviathan Wakes, I was just a bit lukewarm, really didn't like it, didn't see what the fuss was about. But then I read Caliban's War, book 2, and then I got it. This was what I was wanting. This is what I was expecting. This was a good, fast-paced story. The characters were good. The pacing was consistent all the way through with an engaging story, engaging characters. And yeah, this is exactly what I wanted from a very popular space opera. So if you find book 1, maybe it's not to your taste, definitely pursue the series, get to book 2, and hopefully that will be a pleasant surprise for you. A book that surprised me for not the right reasons, again, is a science fiction book, and this is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Again, everyone says this book is great, and don't get me wrong, it's not a bad book, it is good. It's just, in my opinion, it's just not as good as The Martian, the book of his I've read prior to this. People were even saying that Project Hail Mary is better than The Martian. I just didn't get that, I just didn't see it at all. This follows a similar theme where your main character is stranded somewhere. On The Martian, he was stranded on Mars. On this one, he's not. It's in a space station or shuttle or something, I think it is. And it goes from there, really. I just didn't really find it as interesting. an interesting dynamic that appears through the story, which when it happened, I was quite surprised by. But then as that dynamic progressed, I'm trying to keep this spoiler free, by the way. Once that dynamic progressed, I just wasn't all that caught up in it. Yeah, it was interesting, but it's just not worth the hype, in my opinion, that I'd seen previously. So yeah, it kind of disappointed me in a way. It surprised me in a way because it wasn't as good as I thought it was. Maybe I was going in with too high expectations. It's not a bad book by any means. I'd certainly say pick it up, but just don't go into it thinking it's this mind-blowing, best thing in the world story, because in my opinion, it just wasn't. Going back to fantasy now, and a young adult story that I don't normally read. But the reason why I do every now and again pick up a young adult book is because I can be pleasantly surprised. And I was by this, and this was Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. This is book 1 in the duology of this series, and this is about a character called Laszlo Strange, who is I think he's an orphan. He's brought up in a library with these monk librarian type people, and he's shunned really while he's in there. And because he's got a lot of time on his hands and he hasn't got many friends, he reads about this mythical place called Weir. Most people have forgotten about this place, don't even think it exists, until one day some mysterious travellers arrive where Laszlo is and claim to be from Weir. And as Laszlo is the expert on this, he is brought out to speak to these people. And the story goes from there. Now, this is very purple prose. It's a young adult book. With it being young adult, there's a love story that goes through it. Now, that's not really my bag normally, but I fell in love with this story. I was captivated by it. I gave it 5 stars. I very rarely give a book 5 stars, but I did with this. And I think one of the things that helped with, in some stories where at the beginning there's like a paragraph that has some relevance to the story, or maybe it's like an excerpt from the main story that's just put at the start of the book for some reason. Well, I never read those because it could risk spoiling what I'm about to read. So I skipped that, read the story, and fell in love with what I was reading. From other videos I've seen about this story, people have read that and then that spoiled what's gone on for them, and they didn't get the enjoyment out of it that I did. So this book surprised me because I don't really read YA. I don't really like romance in my stories, but I enjoyed this one. I think skipping that little beginning bit really helped. So if you want to read it, you don't want any spoilers, skip that initial part and just enjoy the beautiful writing style, the story as it progresses. I mentioned about the love dynamic, the romance dynamic. It was just getting to that point where I was like, right, can we stop this now? And it stopped. I've read other young adult books where that just keeps on going and going and going, and in my opinion spoils me. But this surprised me because it just did everything just enough. Just enough for the young adult stuff for me as an adult reader to enjoy it. I'd certainly say give it a go if you've got nothing else to, if it's not your bag and you've got a chance, give it a go. And finally is book 5 of Malazan, and this is Midnight Tides. Now, this surprised me because of the direction the story took. So, full disclosure, I dipped out on Malazan. I can't remember if I read book 6 or not, the one after this, or if I bailed out after this one, book 5. But Malazan kicked my ass. Good style. I will hold my hands up and say Malazan was too big for me. But the way it's structured is, in book 1 of Malazan, you follow these people on this continent over here. On book 2, you follow people on this continent over here. And these books are big, dense books. So much going on. You've got to work it out as you go along. It's mind-blowing. It certainly was for me. So book 1, big dense book, following all the people over here. Book 2, no, we're going to go over to this continent over here with a whole host of other people and lots of other things to get used to. But book 3, you come back over here and follow these people again. Oh, thank goodness. Book 4, you come back to these people over here. Great, that must mean book 5, we come back over here, don't we? No. Book 5, you come up here and you're following different people in a completely different continent, different part of the world. And I was like, oh no, more people, more things to get used to. Can we not just go back to that? My head's hurting now. Come on, please. But it was a brilliant book. It surprised me because it was so good. As with all Malazan books, there's sections, the scenes that will stay with you forever. And there certainly one was with this. There's some brilliant ideas, the family dynamics, the relationship dynamics, the things some of the characters go through is unbelievable. So despite when I started reading it, my initial thoughts of, oh no, I've got to follow all these new people, I've got to get my head around all this, I actually really, really enjoyed it at the end. And the reason why I ended up not following it on after this was just because I just couldn't face another 1,000-page book. It was just too much for me. But it surprised me in a very good way. So hopefully that's been good. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a really big thumb. Give it a thumbs up, give it a like. It helps me out massively. And let me know what you think of those books. What books have surprised you? And let me know in the comments below. I'll see you again in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.